Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly wrap for June 12th, 2020. I'm Seth Miller from PaxX.Aero.
And I'm Maryann Simpson from Apex Media. This week saw the ban on transit flights in Abu Dhabi and Dubai being lifted, meaning that Etihad and Emirates, in particular, can connect passengers again through their respective main hubs, although the United Arab Emirates is, of course, still off limits to foreign visitors.
Yeah, it's really nice to see some of the international transit options starting to open back up again. We had Singapore and Hong Kong also recently expand their transit options for passengers as long as you're not entering the country. And there's been a lot of talk about how short-haul domestics and, sort of European Schengen area type travel is going to be the initial driver of the recovery. That's where we're going to see passengers start to flock to more quickly. And seeing the opportunity, at least, for some of the long-haul travel to come back, there's at least potential that people can start making those trips a little more easily as well, which who knows if they will, but the potential's there.
Yeah, I think these are really significant announcements because, like you said, these are such significant transport hubs. And even the home airlines of these hubs they're flag carriers for their country, but they serve everyone. It doesn't matter what country you live in, it's still great to do an Emirates flight. You know that. It's still fun to travel Etihad. It's still fun to travel Singapore Airlines. These are sort of the top tier, I think, or like the prestige airlines that make people want to fly. For me anyway, I flew to Thailand a couple months ago before this all started. And, for me, flying on Etihad to Thailand was one of the more exciting things because I got to go through Abu Dhabi because I knew so much about Etihad's incredible service. So I think that this is good for morale for travelers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the fact that they do fly to so many countries and connect so many different places around the globe, huge potential. We just got to see if the passengers return now.
Yeah, and I think it's also great for duty-free, too, because if you look at these hubs, they are some of the biggest shopping destinations on your frequent flyers shopping list. So that's another industry that we haven't talked about yet in this show, but, understandably, if nobody's at the airport, nobody's buying duty-free, so that's another industry that can use this.
Yeah, we'll have to see if those shops reopen and when the demand there starts to pick back up. It does seem, though, that the demand in and out of the UK is going to remain depressed for a little while.
Mate. So, this week, UK travelers, myself included, have been watching really closely on the news because on Monday, it was finally implemented a 14-day quarantine for any arriving visitors. And that's by land, air, or sea, but obviously air travel would be the primary place that people are coming from. There's been a lot of backlash on this decision from many different parties, citing that A, it's a bit late for something like this to be happening. B, that it kind of lacks any scientific merit. They haven't been able to point to any concrete research that shows that this is really going to help with levels of infection. C, levels of infection here are higher than almost anywhere else, so why punish people coming from places where the R rate or where the impact of COVID hasn't been as bad? It's bad for the economy and it's just not enforceable.
Well, certainly not enforceable the way that the UK has approached it. We did see quarantines show up in other countries, like you noted months ago, really, where they did enforce it. And it was, they used a mix of technology and humans, and they chose to do it. You also had to have the people willing to comply. I agree, it's probably a little bit of a too little too late game that we're faced with here. Probably, the fact, I think really the point you made that the UK has one of the higher R rates and spread rates right now and is reducing the lockdown otherwise is probably the most telling part of this situation, far more than any of the other bits.
Yeah, but on the bright side, we've got IAG, EasyJet, and Ryanair have all joined forces to bring something called a pre-action protocol letter, which is basically like, hey, we're going to sue you in a minute sort of letter to the UK government. Michael O'Leary's been incredibly vocal about this, as he is on a lot of different matters. And this is actually pushing the government to agree to review the restriction a lot sooner than they had initially planned to. And a lot of people think that it's going to be scrapped. So that's really good news for the UK aviation industry and for travelers who want to travel to the UK as well.
Yeah, it'll be real interesting to see how that plays out. Who's our guest this week, Maryann?
Well, Seth, In a bit of shameless self-promotion for the Airline Passenger Experience official magazine, which has just released its summer edition this week, we've decided to invite Valerie Silva, who's the deputy editor, and she's really the driving force behind the magazine. And the reason why this issue is so different is that, of course, it had to transform really quickly in light of everything that's going on in the aviation industry. So we've decided to invite Val here to tell us a little bit about the process and a little bit about some of the really amazing content in the issue that I think is going to really find a place in the hearts of anybody in aviation who's had to deal with the COVID-19 crisis, which is everyone, of course. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Valerie Silva. Welcome, Val. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Maryann. Hi, Seth. Thanks for having me.
Val, why don't you tell us about the theme of this issue and also describe a little bit of how the Apex editorial team had to sort of pivot to adjust the content and the publishing strategy to the evolving crisis?
Yeah, of course. So it really was in early March when we began to understand the severity and the magnitude of what was happening, but also the fact that we wouldn't be able to proceed with our intended editorial lineup. Our first response to that was the What We're Made Of campaign, a digital-first initiative in which we reached out to community and industry members to share their thoughts, ideas, feelings with regards to the coronavirus crisis. When we realized that people really were keen to participate and to connect on that level, we decided to keep the theme going for the magazine, which would end up being our first digital-only issue.
What are some of the other COVID-19 stories that really stand out to you as compelling in this issue?
Well, that's going to be really difficult to narrow down, but I guess to start us off, we have some shorter front-of-book pieces, including one called Clearing the Air, which surveys the different strategies that airlines are taking right now to regain passenger trust and confidence with communications and marketing. Another one called Lights Out by our contributor and IFE expert, Tomas Romero, really questions how vacant theaters and direct-to-digital content will impact the future of IFE. In terms of features, we have two different, though I hope equally insightful ones. The first, called Aftershocks, is really much more of a retrospective, looking back to mass disruptions of the past, including SARS, 9/11, the global recession, and how coronavirus compares. The other one, called Where To From Here, takes on a much more granular approach, looking at the shifts that the passenger experience is already seeing in response to the pandemic, but also the ways in which many of these changes were already underway. And to finish up, we also have our staple throwback, this time written by our editorial assistant, Justin, on the topic of Y2K. He was able to interview some experts and airline reps who were there that day, and it really is a great read.
Val, one of my favorite features in Experience Magazine is a regular feature called the Travelogue. Can you explain to everybody watching what the Travelogue is all about and what you decided to focus on for this edition of the magazine?
Yeah, so the Travelogue is one of my favorite segments in the magazine. One of the reasons being our art team always pulls through with a stunning illustration to match the story. For those of you who don't know, it's a first-person account of someone's professional development or a career-defining moment in their lives. In the past, we've interviewed Delta's Allison Osmond, who spoke to us about her journey from studying journalism to working in in-flight services, as well as Terry Steiner on how she founded her film distribution company in New York City. This time around, we have Jovita Tove, CEO of Encore In-Flight, who spoke to us about foregoing her company's 10th anniversary celebrations to support her airline and studio partners. She also spoke to us about past experiences, such as working as a bartender and traveling around the world for a year, as well as her relationship with her grandmother and how that has shaped her into the leader she is today.
Oh, that's super interesting. Really looking forward to taking a peek online now. There's also been not too much news in the in-flight connectivity world these last couple weeks and months while the industry's focused on other things. But on Thursday, we heard from Delta that it's now looking to diversify its in-flight connectivity portfolio, and that means trying to find a second provider to join Gogo in its ranks. Gogo's pushing back, hoping that its 2Ka option, bringing Ka band to the carrier, is going to help provide enough capacity. But Delta does seem somewhat focused on finding a new option and finding more capacity in the Ka band space. So it's going to be real interesting to see how that plays out. Part of that move has to do with the antenna technology in use and whether they're going to be able to swap out the Ku band antennas for Ka options on board. And we also got some news this past week from Phasor, which is one of the electronically steered array antenna companies that had a bankruptcy and finally got a new owner. They're now going to be a division of the Hanwha Systems Group, which is a Korean conglomerate. The arm that they're part of is defense, which is interesting because most of the ESA systems thus far have been focused on military and defense and government applications. We still haven't really seen them sort of transition down to the affordable level for commercial applications, and that's what sort of the whole industry's been going for. So I know Phasor isn't the only vendor by far in this space, but it's been a challenge for all of them, Maryann.
Yeah, that's right, Seth. Right before the whole sort of lockdown thing started and travel ended as a result of COVID-19, Apex Media had partnered with OneWeb to go to Satellite 2020 in Washington, D.C., and we were going to make like a cool documentary video about what is, the up-and-coming thing in satellite and what's going on also just like in the antenna industry. So unfortunately, we weren't able to make the full documentary with OneWeb, but we did salvage as much of the content as we could. And there's some really cool interviews with Isotropic Systems, which is an up-and-coming player in the ESA market. They're not really going for the entire sort of terminal. They're trying to just sell their technology or license their technology. Sorry, the police are here. They're licensing their technology to other players in the industry, and we spoke to Kai Meta as well, so you can find those videos on the channel. They're part of a series called Satcom for aircraft, so if that's something you're into, please watch those.
Awesome. Definitely need to take a look at those as well. Parting shot this week, we've had the idea of the GermFalcon as a UV light means, sort of sits in a bar cart that can be used to sterilize an airplane, and it's been around for a few years now and never really made much progress in the market. But this week, they announced a deal with Honeywell for global production and distribution of this, and it now looks like they're going to be ready to have, systems ready to fly as soon as July.
Yeah, this is really cool to hear from GermFalcon. I remember when it came out and the prototype looked a little bit like something out of Doctor Who. Really cool idea. But it wasn't paid too much attention because it is a concept that slows down turnaround time. And that's not the problem anymore. Cleanliness is the problem. So, I'm thrilled to hear about this news from them and to see the product progressing. And they've got another product called the UV Hammer, which is designed for larger spaces like operating theaters. And then my understanding is that that's under investigation by several different airports or airport authorities to disinfect larger spaces like bathrooms and lounges and things like that.
Yeah, I think that, you mentioned the turnaround time challenge, and when turnarounds were super quick, this would have been a problem. Now that turnarounds are much longer because of the cleaning requirements, actually the GermFalcon speeds that up. So it's an interesting swing there.
Definitely. All right, well, that's all the time we've got for the weekly wrap this week. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Thanks, Seth, for being a wonderful co-host again.
My pleasure.
All right, make sure you follow myself and Seth online, and please subscribe to the channel if you like this video and you like anything to do with aviation, airline, passenger experience stuff. We'll hope to see you next week.
Bye-bye.